Good morning. Good morning. I'm digging this round deal. This is pretty cool. And I got a time limit, so I need to jump right in. Paris Collective knows me well enough that they told me a shorter time, so I'm hoping they built in a little bit here. Let's jump right in. Theology of place. How to love a place, right? What does that look like? What does that feel like? What is the process of that? I don't have time to go into all of that, but I want to do that through my story this morning. And I've been privileged and honored and graced in my life to do that over a long period of time. So this morning, I just would like to encourage those of you who are in the midst of it, who are thinking it through, who are wrestling with things in this process as you try to love the place where you are, how to be present in the place we're called, right? I'm going to come from Jeremiah 29, and some of the context here are this community just loses a war. They're they're heading into exile into Babylon. They don't like Babylon. They had to walk there, right? You know the context of this story, many of you. And it's a new culture. It's a new place. And from this space, we actually get this prescription on how to love a place, right? From this group of people they're heading into exile, they're heading into an oppressive situation in their minds, right? Part of this, like where you're called, love where you're called, we aren't always happy about where we're called, right? I live in Portland, Oregon. I'm a black man living in Portland, Oregon. So, I don't think I have to say anything else about that. Loving where you're called. And I work for the United Methodist Church, and I grew up Baptist. So this thing is real in my life, right? Jeremiah 29, that famous part of that people love the quote is, "For I know the plans I have for you," right? Saith the Lord, these plans to prosper and all these kinds of things. And we love that verse. People love that verse, right? Makes you feel good. But we take it so much out of context, it's ridiculous, right? So this group of people is actually told, as they go into this place, the first, we're going to walk through this prescription. The first thing they're told is build and settle, right? Like build here, settle here. At this idea of establish a residence in this place, get comfortable because you're going to be here, right? And so, that first order of business in our minds, and trust me, I'm still trying to work through this in Portland, Oregon, right? Like build and settle here. Man, I moved here from Atlanta, right? Establish a residence, get comfortable, that in and of itself, that first step is a difficult one as we think about long-term commitments to places. And I would say these are long-term commitments. If you're not there for the long term, you're only going to do harm, right? We know this now. We know that there are some ways to connect and maybe do some small things and internships and things like that, and those things are helpful. But this is the long-term commitment to a place. So the place I want to highlight this morning is a place called South Atlanta. And that place is where my family landed out of Philadelphia in 1997. We landed in that place. And I moved to Atlanta from Philadelphia. Those are two different places, right? People talk funny, right? This is my attitude going in, man. They talk funny. I might stay here 5 years, but I'm going on back up to Philly, right? And so this idea of building and settling and getting comfortable in a southern city was not one in which I thought, like, this is cool, we're going to be here. I didn't like the southern pace, right? Like, everything was slow. You got to stop and, you got to chat first before you get to the business, right? I came from Northeast, right? You get to the business. Like, let's get this thing done, right? But here we had to settle in. We had to slow down. We had to talk about Jesus more. And like, man, these folks open every meeting with prayer. What is wrong with them, right? We here to talk about housing in the neighborhood. They praying, right? So this idea of building and settling in, this was our place. And this was the house that we moved into in South Atlanta. We actually got to build this house. There was a housing organization called Cares Community Housing. We got to build this house from the ground up. My kids were 6 and 10 and something, maybe 13. I'm old, sorry. They get mad because I forget their ages, but I got 6 kids, so, you're number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So, but the second idea of this says plant and eat, right? Sustain yourself in this place. Not only build and settle, but sustain yourself, right? What is your work going to look like? What kind of effort are you putting in to the livelihood of this place, right? How are you going to do that? What are you going to plant? How are you going to work? What kind of effort are you putting into this, right? These questions, we see this coming up out of Scripture, but this is so relevant if you're going to love your place. If you're gonna sink into this understanding of what God thinks about place, He wants us to build and settle. He wants us to get comfortable, stay there for a long time, and then think about your work in that place. What does that look like? What's your vocation? What kind of effort are you giving to the land of that place? I'm from Philly. I don't know nothing about gardening and planting and all those kind of things, but apparently it takes a while, right? The next piece of this movement is, he says, marry and have children. Now, I've been in this for a long time, and I tell you, we would get such excited people in, and when they were single and young and right out of college, and they want to be here for their lives, and then all of a sudden they fall in love with somebody, and they're like, hey, we don't know about raising our kids in this place. We got to get up out of here, right? Right? That was a story over and over and over again. But we see in the scriptures that that's really not the intention. How are you going to think about lasting? And this is not just for married folks, right? This is not a message for married people and couples. This is talking about this principle of creating lasting bonds in a place, right? How are you going to commit to life in that place? Right? How are you going to commit to the culture in that place? Because you have kids, then you are the culture becomes important, right? You get involved deeply in some work in that community and neighborhood where you're part of a community, you're part of people, then you're going to care about the culture. You start coaching baseball, or you start doing something with the arts in the city, or are you raising a family that there's a commitment to culture that God's looking for, that we should be asking ourselves the question. One of the things we learned early on when we planted a church in this place, all the folks and we had this multicultural church, right? And all the folks who could go somewhere on holidays, mostly white folks, they were gone. So the Sundays after holidays, it was just all folks of color up in there. So I had to have sermons dudes, on holidays, you need to stay home sometime. Because you are not committing to the culture if you are not with people on Thanksgiving or Christmas or Easter or any of those things. You jet and you bolt with your privilege. That's not cool. Create lasting bonds. Your kids, whoever the community you commit to needs to be a part of the life and tradition of that place. That first one was about our work. And so we had this church, and we had this idea to start a coffee shop, and that's the first commitment that I made over my head in this place, right? To start this coffee shop, and this coffee shop called Community Grounds. That picture was the first latte out of that coffee shop. Like, I had to have that one. No, the first one goes to me, bro, right? Like. Next picture, this is my son Josh. That's his wife. A whole nother story that this kid grew up in a black neighborhood and came home with a white woman to marry. I'm over it. I love this deal, but gonna be real with you, our brother had to get over that. The commitment to long-term didn't fully work out in my time there. The commitment to long-term, this kid was 6 years old when we moved there. He still lives there. He still lives in that house with his wife. He now runs the coffee shop and has added on a grocery store, and they're about to do a restaurant. That's my son Joel, who worked also in that coffee shop. What I know now looking back is some of our commitments that we're making, some of the ways in which we're loving the places, they might be carried out by the next generation behind you. It might not be you. It is important. This idea, this next point of marry off your children, that generations begin to speak in to the places in which we plant ourselves. That the theology that sits there is one of generations. God didn't intend, I don't think, for a work to start in me to end when I leave. And in this case, it's being carried on by my sons. The traditions and the holidays and the celebrations that come with marrying off your children still carrying off in the same house that my son is now living in. And hopefully we'll add some grandchildren soon. That these things may not get carried out by you. That what if your children and your grandchildren will occupy this space in which you are breaking into right now? What does that look like? It makes you think differently about what you're doing, about the important parts of it, what you protest, what policies, what housing, you think differently when you're thinking about generations out. If I'm going to be coming to visit my grandchildren in this place that I now feel called to, what does that look like? Seek the peace of the city. Starts to take on a different meaning. This idea of peace, break down these barriers between people. Right? Become the way that people see God in your family, in your commitments to community, in the folks you're gathering with. Married or single, you need to find a place to lock into that you are going to be for a long time, and the person after you, whether it's your child or some kid you adopt in the neighborhood or some family you get to know, some next generation expression of the work you're doing. This is a long-time commitment, my friends. This isn't This isn't for us just to celebrate what we're doing now and us feeling good and us worshiping together, which I like, which I love that the Parish Collective draws rooms together like this. But man, we got, like, what's the next generation of this look like? I'm working on that now. As I'm raising my kids or committing to a church or committing to a community group or whatever that might be. Seek the peace of that place. Break down the barriers that exist in that place. And a lot of those barriers have to do with our family and our personal commitment to safety, right? And those types of things. Then this does something that I don't necessarily like very much. But then it says, like, pray for this city, seek its peace, right? There are songs about that, aren't there? Like, you are God of the city, right? Isn't that a song? Right? And it feels so great, right? Like, we're gonna save this place. It's wonderful, right? And then we pray for it, but then God says, and here's the deal. If it doesn't prosper, you won't. I don't like that part. Like, dude, let me prosper. Like, I'm going to do what you say. Like, treat me right in this deal. Right? I'm sacrificing. Right? I moved in. Right? I'm raising my family here. Don't I get some kudos for that? Right? And God said, yeah, that's cool, but I'm going to lock your prosperity up into your community, into your place. Into the place I have called you to be. Pray for it, and as it prospers, you will prosper. That is the hard part of theology of place, isn't it? Because if I'm in this place, and I'm praying and I'm working, my prosperity becomes built in it. This is why we started talking to people about, dudes, you got to stay home on some holidays. You got to get to know people on a deeper level. You got to know what it feels like to not be able to travel on a holiday and do it right here in the backyard at a barbecue. Right? Barbecue is my love language. You know, it's just... That there are all of these cultural implications in here. Right? You got to learn a culture. You can't colonize a place. You got to learn it, right? You can't bring your stuff into this place and they're going to act like you and sing like you, right? And do it the way you do it. People that know me know Leroy Barber is Leroy Barber. I'm not giving up my culture for nobody. I was formed and created in the image of God. I am fearfully and wonderfully made, and that's who I'm going to be. Stop trying to change folks. Then God gets to this idea. Then the 11th verse comes in. After all that. Because you got to know, like, this is hard stuff, right? People, they probably like, God, come on, like, build and settle, have my kids here, like, invest in the culture. Like, now you got my prosperity locked up in it. What's going on? And then we get to the 11th verse. I got you. For I know the plans I have for you, saith the Lord. Plans that are good. Plans that will prosper. We no longer hear you, do we? Plans that will prosper the community. As the community is prospering, you will prosper. And these plans are good. Even if it's in a place that you don't like. I know the plans I got for you.